Welcome to Harford County's virtual town hall meeting here at Harford Community College's beautiful Darlington Hall. Good evening. I'm County Executive Barry Glassman. Tonight's attendees and to everyone watching live from the county website, thank you for participating. This fourth annual virtual town hall meeting is to gather public input on the county budget for the fiscal year 2019. Our virtual town hall format has won national awards for giving citizens a voice in their local government. Of course, you are always welcome to come to a meeting in person, but with social media, email, phone calls, or good old U.S. mail, you can be heard without leaving your home. Thanks to those of you who have already sent in your comments, we will be reading them aloud this evening. For those watching us live online, you can listen to what others have to say, and you can provide comments for us to read now using the contact information on your screen. We're also here tonight to listen to our live audience. But first, we have some introductions and a brief overview of the budget process. Joining me this evening is my budget chief, Kim Spence, Treasurer Robbie Sandlass, and Senior Government Affairs Specialist, and our MC for the evening, Mr. Michael P. Mason. Now a few words about the budget. The county budget is based on projected revenue, that is, property and income taxes paid by our citizens. As in the past several years, revenues are expected to show only a modest growth next year. In light of this new normal, my administration has been working smarter by finding efficiencies and cost savings. This has allowed us to budget $24 million over the past 3 years to help our teachers, law enforcement, correctional officers, and my own county employees to get back on their salary schedules. With construction of the new Use Benefit Elementary School complete, we will soon break ground on the new Havre de Grace Middle High School. This is on top of record funding levels for our school's operating budget this year. In fact, we continue to fund our education system above the maintenance of effort, and over the past 3 years, we have dedicated $15 million in new funding to our schools, compared to only $1 million coming from the state. To prepare next year's county budget, we will consider your comments and the needs of the county and balance that with our projected revenue. So then in April, I will propose a budget to fund the county government for the next fiscal year, which always begins on the 1st of July. By law, the budget has to be approved by the Harford County Council, but the council cannot add funding to any area of the budget except for our public schools. And funding for the schools can only be added up to the amount requested by the school board, and only by taking those funds from elsewhere in the county general fund budget. One more note, the school system is just one of our several outside agencies that depend in full or in part on county funding for their budgets. These agencies include the Sheriff's Department, the Community College, Public Library, and our Health Department. Once local funding for these outside agencies is approved by the County Council, budgeting decisions within each agency are made by that agency's leadership based on the revenue they receive from all sources. In other words, the county cannot tell outside agencies which programs to cut or how much to spend on their priorities. Now, it is truly time for us to listen to you, our citizens. But before I turn things over to Mike, I want to assure you that no matter how you contact me, whether through email, phone calls, or see me in the grocery store, I listen to your comments and I will take them to heart as I balance our priorities in the next budget proposal as we prepare for fiscal 2019. Mr. Mason, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive, and good evening, everybody. Before we get started tonight, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. First, we're going to hear from the live audience during this portion. As I call your name, I ask you to please come up to the mic. You'll have 2 minutes to share your budget priorities. Those representing a group may speak for 3 minutes. Please wrap up your comments if you hear the bell so we can hear from as many of you as possible. Thank you. After a time, I'll review the input we received so far from email, Facebook, and Twitter. Then we'll switch to messages received during tonight's live event, including your phone calls to a dedicated phone number we've set up just for tonight. That number, which is shown on your screen, is 443-412-2700. So give us a call. Anyone who still wishes to speak after that will have the opportunity to do so. And with that, let's begin. I'd first like to invite up Nancy Smith. Yes, ma'am.
Well, this is the first time I've spoken into a mic, so if I'm a little nervous, I apologize. Does that count into my 3 minutes? Here we go. I'm Vice President of the Jarrettsville Rec Council, and the Jarrettsville Rec Center has been on the out-year project list, and in fact, in 2014 fiscal year, it was a funded project. But I assume because there were more pressing issues, it did not go through. I don't know what. It might have been the Havre de Grace schools may have needed more funding. I'm not sure. I'm not real familiar with how all this works. So, but I do know the Jarrettsville area needs a community recreation center. We do not have a full-size gym in our area. We are cramped into the Jarrettsville Elementary School. That was redone in the 70s. It's a multi-purpose room. I went to watch my son play basketball. Only the 5, 6, 7-year-olds can play there because if the big kids played there, it's not safe. There's no bleachers. The parents and grandparents were all around on the floor. There's nowhere to sit. Other rec things, it's just a real problem trying to use the schools as our rec programs. I know Taekwondo program, they had a pipe burst at North Bend Elementary. Their equipment was not covered because there's nowhere to store our stuff. We store them in the schools, and that's another issue. We've lost the cheer program because there's nowhere to store the mats. The moms were bringing the mats in their cars, and we also are on a downward trend for basketball because we don't have a gym that would really accommodate anybody above the age of 7 or 8. It's jazzercise. That's a really growing, and how many years has jazzercise been going? They have to use Forest Hill Rec Center, but it's Jarrettsville Jazzercise. But they do use the gym on Tuesday and Thursday, but Saturdays, they have to go to Forest Hill. But it's the Jarrettsville Rec Council. Anybody else from the Jarrettsville Rec in our last minute or so would like to share anything? Yeah. Is anybody else? But I also know the drug crisis across the country. I think about my 7-year-old. I'm thinking, as most parents, when he turns 14, I'm going to start working full time, and he's going to be home from the hours of 2:30 to 5:30. I thought, maybe that's not a good idea now to leave my 14-year-old unattended. Wouldn't it be great to have a community center where he could go somewhere rather than being home? Maybe that's our kids are most vulnerable at that age. So we need it in Jarrettsville.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next up, I'd like to invite Bryan Jones.
Good evening. I am also part of the Jarrettsville Rec Council, and while I've just recently joined the council, I have been involved with the Jarrettsville Rec for coming up on almost 20 years with my children and now my grandchildren. So I've been involved quite a bit with the rec and the facilities there, and the lack of having our own dedicated rec center has certainly always been an issue. And I know, as Nancy said, with basketball and things like that, if we have a game where we expect to have a lot of parents and stuff, we have to go somewhere else and borrow a facility or rent a facility to do that, because we have no place for the fans to sit. And having issues with my own lower extremity, I know sitting on the floor is not something that I can do for an extended period of time. But we're a rather large area, and yet I think we're one of the few areas within the county that does not have a dedicated rec center. And the fact that it has previously been on the budget for construction, and it kind of got pushed to the side, I think it's time to relook at that and maybe bring it forward a little bit. I understand it is forecast for out years, maybe in 23, fiscal year 23, but we'd really love to see that moved a little closer up so that we can take advantage of those facilities for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We're going to switch it up here a little bit. Next is Mr. Tom Fitzpatrick to speak on education.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tom Fitzpatrick. I'm the District F Rep for the Harford County Board of Education. And this is the second time I've spoken at a virtual town hall. The first time I spoke was at the very first virtual town hall when our budget situation was quite a bit different than it is now. I recall remarking that we hoped that we would have a strong and constructive relationship with the county government, and that we would begin to backfill some of the damage that has occurred to teacher pay and teacher retention because of the fiscal crisis and differences in policy in the past. I'm very pleased to be able to say that the situation today is considerably better than it was, and I'd like to express my gratitude to the County Executive and County Council for supporting us. As the County Executive pointed out, county government has tightened its belt quite a bit and has used those savings to help fund our programs and other programs in the county. We too, because the increases in funding that we have received have not necessarily always filled the requests that we've had in order to meet our commitments to raise teacher pay. We've also had to cut some programs and lay off some staff. Moving forward, we are closer to parity with our surrounding jurisdictions than we have been in a long time. There is still a little work to be done in that respect. And we hope in future that we will be able to look forward to being able to backfill some of the programs that we've had to curtail, to begin to renew the task of reducing class sizes in our system, and to move forward to a dedication to quality education for all of our students in Harford County. So and one last thing. Like, I'm the guy from Harvard Grace, and I'm supposed to forget this. I can't sit down without, and I'd be sadly remiss if I didn't express my personal thanks and the thanks of all my constituents in Harvard Grace for the support that we've gotten from Harford County government and also from my colleagues on the board for the construction of the new Harvard Grace High School and Middle School. We are all very excited about it in Harvard Grace, and again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Next up, I'd like to invite Rachel Ashbrook. Yes.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Ashbrook. I live in the Aberdeen area. I'm here with my 2 children tonight to really think about their future and what this county should look like and our budget priorities. Predominantly, I've been thinking over this past year about diversity and race relations in our county. When I look at the news and the moments that Harford County has come to public and national attention, it's when a woman was walking in Bel Air and she is, confronted by police for walking wild brown. We have in October of 2017, Bel Air students spelling out the N-word. We have white supremacy flyers being placed in the Fountain Glen neighborhood. We have Joppatown, VFW being rented by white supremacists. So there's something going on in Harford County that our budget does not seem to confront. When I did a search of the over 900 pages for elements that really connected with prioritizing diversity, cultural proficiency, implicit and explicit bias training for our county leaders and service providers, I did not see that kind of language reflected. And I did do a detailed search, and I found cultural references in regards to the Harford Community College mission statement, in library goals. I found it in relationship to natural resource programs. There was a lot of training budgeted for in this county, focusing on fire training, EMS, rescue and support, hazmat, family support training, and it goes on. But at no point do I see training for Harford County Public School teachers in terms of cultural proficiency. I do not see our sheriff's office being trained in how to interact with a diverse community. So these are some of the priorities that I would really like to see shift so that when we look to the news and the national publicity Harford County gets, it is not in a negative light that race is talked about in connection with us. This is the community I want my children to be raised in, and I want any friend of theirs to feel welcome. So I think we can prioritize this not only through how our law enforcement is trained, but also how our teachers are trained. So making sure you're fully funding teacher salaries, looking to that education budget really as a requirement, a need for our community, so that we can provide what is necessary to make public safety a priority. I looked at the goals and objectives where it stated we are focusing on strengthening our communities, strengthening families and communities by promoting awareness about threats to public health and safety. Racism is the biggest threat to public health and safety, and there are many ways that we can work to solve this community problem, but we have to put our money where our heart is. And if our heart is not in keeping our children safe in our schools, people safe just walking through their own communities from threat of harassment, then we are misappropriating our funds. So thank you very much for listening this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Ashbrook. We're going to pause for a few moments to read some of the input that we've received this evening from email, Facebook, and Twitter. And also, if you are in here and if you signed up to speak and haven't had a chance, we're going to continue that here in a few moments. And if you have not signed up, please feel free to see the ladies in the hallway as well, too. So on Facebook, this comes from Vernay Metzger. Unlike Baltimore County, Harford County has no dental services for seniors. It would be great to provide dental services for seniors on a limited income who can't afford any type of dental services now. William M. would like to see improved access to the Perryman Peninsula as traffic is quite heavy on the current existing road. This comes from Ralph T. This is just a reinvestment in our roads and infrastructure here in the county as well. Mark W. wrote in to request more help for the homeless issue. Melanie T. wrote in to invest in infrastructure and continued financial support towards law enforcement personnel here in Harford County. Mackenzie W. asked to prioritize funding for the John Archer School for improvements. Colleen K. wrote in, education. Sarah H. asked to invest in after-school programs for middle school kids. This would better equip them for success in high school and keep them off the streets. Lauren S. wrote in for education, structured literacy training for all teachers, an emphasis on early reading interventions and screening for kids with learning and attention issues. Carol G. I'd like to see paid firefighters instead of a dwindling volunteer force. Yvonne H. asked for continued record funding to combat the opioid crisis here in Harford County. This is all great outreach that we've received so far tonight, and with that, we're going to go ahead and resume our public input. So right now, I'd like to invite up from Harford Community College, Mr. Rich Norling and Dr. Diana Phillips. Or Mr. Rich Norling.
Good evening. Yeah, for the record, my name is Rich Norling. I live at 3121 East Nobles Mill Road in Darlington, and I currently serve as chair of the Board of Trustees of Harford Community College. And Dr. Phillips is with me. I'm here partly to join the gratitude parade, if you will. As you know, in the 2010 fiscal year, Harford Community College suffered a very significant decrease in its budget under a previous administration, caused most likely because the recession was starting and the revenues were down. Last year was the first year, courtesy of your increase in the college's budget, that the college had a budget from the county greater than it had in 2009. So we greatly appreciate that. The bulk of that increase was used by the college to provide a 2% pay increase to the many people who work so hard to deliver the services for the college. And we greatly appreciate that. As you also know, originally 20 years ago, the state goal passed by the General Assembly was that 1/3 of the funding for community colleges would come from the state, 1/3 from counties, and 1/3 from student tuition. That goal has never been reached in terms of state funding. On average now, the state funding is 23% of the cost of community colleges, and what that does is put a lot of pressure on counties and student tuition. And in recent years, the College Board has had to make significant increases in tuition in order just to continue up with inflation and to keep the services and the quality of education coming. So we appreciate what you have done for the county. We are working very hard in Annapolis, hoping to change that situation in Annapolis, but it does take time. Last year, Governor Hogan proposed that colleges limit tuition increases to no more than 2%, and he put $4 million in the state budget to be divided among the colleges that agreed to that. Our share was $192,000, and we did hold our tuition increase to no more than 2% last year. That was one-time money. It did not go into our funding base. So we had to correct in this year's budget for the fact that that money was not coming. Last year, like the school board, we cut $1 million of pre-existing activities that had been going on, lower priority things. So the college, when it does budgeting, does not just assume that we continue everything that was going on the previous year. We do examine that. This year's college budget cuts another $250,000 of lower priority activities. So what we would like from the county, if it's at all possible, is enough funds from the county to help us give faculty, staff, and administrators the same kind of pay increase that you're able to provide for county employees. As you know, people, just like the county government and the library system and the school system, people are really the most important part of the college's budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norling. Next up, I'd like to invite is Diego Tejada.
Hello, I'm Diego Tejada. I'm here as an instructor for Jerseyville Taekwondo. And I recently got involved with this group, and the lack of facilities right now that we meet in the North Bend gym, they don't have storage place like it was stated before. We had a pipe break, ended up losing some of our equipment. We had to replace it ourselves from our own budgeting. These students that we're trying to help and grow as martial artists become part of the community, help out in not just the Taekwondo community, but in the local community. So a place for us to be able to get the proper equipment to help them grow as individuals and competitors in an Olympic sport is something that would bring good reputation to Harford County itself. Participating in private schools for Taekwondo before what this group provides at a more reasonable rate for families to be able to introduce their kids to discipline, physical fitness, and overall community would be greatly increased if we were able to have a spot where we could call our own without having to add overhead by going private and having to compete with other schools that are already present. The program itself has been around for 20 years. It's one of the longest running schools in Harford County, and one of the few, if not the only program that's not private that has actually made sent students to national competitions and represented for Olympic Taekwondo and form competitions. And we just would like to see the rec center be put up and moved up in the priority list so we could give back for everything we've been able to get so far.
Thank you, Mr. Tejada. We're going to go ahead and take another break here and read some of the comments that we've received this evening via phone call and also on Facebook as well. This one's coming from Jacinda E. Posted that she would like to see a replacement building for the Aberdeen Parks and Recreation Program. After the one they had been working out fell out of disrepair a few years ago and had to make temporary use of shipping containers to store supplies and equipment. Those comments were echoed by Rachel C., Kristen A., Vinnie C., Leslie W., and Casey H. We just received a phone call from Mr. Ryan Burby of the Harford County Education Association, who wanted to thank the County Executive Glassman for his commitment to education. He looks forward to continued support of the Board of Education and to continue funding salaries for teachers. Another Facebook post that just came in regarding Aberdeen Parks and Recreation Program from Christopher A. Aberdeen Parks and Recreation has one of the biggest rec councils with no building. We need a facility along with a sports complex in the area. We need to invest in these kids in this area. Just received a call in from Ashley R. She called to thank the county executive for his commitment to strengthening EMS in Harford County and for supplementing the volunteer service with the county's new surge ambulance. I will go back to some of the Facebook comments that we received also earlier in the week as well. Scott C., he supports the construction of the Jarrettsville Rec Center, which has been echoed here this evening as well, too. Nancy S. also joined in on that, asking that the Jarrettsville community also has a recreation community center and to make it a budget priority. Bill W. had asked for the restoration of highway user funds and for road improvements from the state on Route 24. Lisa R., she asked that the impact fee from building new homes in the area go to schools, the sheriff's department, and the fire departments. FV, take 1 year and reinvest in infrastructure. We also received some emails this evening as well, requesting, this is from M. Lease, who asked for a reinvestment in community crosswalks to connect our neighborhoods throughout Harford County, and also asked for more dedicated funds and equipment for snow removal. And from Carol Now, who's a resident of Jarrettsville, asked for the approve the funding for the Jarrettsville Rec Center. At this time, I'd like to invite anybody who may have signed up or has not signed up who would like to speak to come to the microphone. To end this evening and kind of express our budget appetite, we received from Mary R., who asked for a new Chinese restaurant in Havre de Grace. So with that, I'd like to invite up the county executive to conclude this evening's virtual town hall.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, I just want to thank everyone that came out, everyone that's following this at home. I've got a couple of minutes here before we wrap up. I do understand some of the requests for Parks and Rec and community centers, and I would remind folks we just floated about $50 million in bonds, I think, on Tuesday. The county's AAA bond rating has been retained, and in fact, we have floated bonds for the last 3 years, less than 3%. In fact, Tuesday it was 2.6%. Part of that is making some of those tough decisions to push back some of the capital projects in Parks and Rec and a number of others. Quite frankly, when we came into office 3 years ago, the debt had tripled, and the bond rating agencies said, well, you've got so much on the books, you're never going to be able to pay that. So some of those tough decisions were to bring the CIP, which is called the Capital Improvement Program, to bring it back down to what is a realistic amount that the county can afford. And we have been able to do that. The good news is that we are seeing, through economic development and the assessable base, we are seeing revenues and income taxes increasing. In fact, the county's general fund surplus has been restored, and now we're kind of growing back. So I think the good side of this is that although we are going to be very conservative predicting what the future holds for the county based on the new federal tax law and some of the things not in our control, that I do think we will be able to begin to look at some of these projects going forward. I feel more comfortable with the financial strength of the county. I actually even had to hold back the Havre de Grace Middle High School for a couple of years, and Mr. Fitzpatrick was not happy with me for a couple of years when I had to do that. But we have made those kind of tough decisions. It's paid off for us, and I think going forward, the county will be in a better position to address some of these outstanding, and I agree, some of these outstanding needs that we have in the county in a number of areas. We have a pretty big list to work on. So just thank you for coming out to our fourth annual town hall meeting. Whether you sent me a message via mail, letter, or email, I assure you that I will review each and every one of these comments. If you think of something over the next few days, feel free to send me an email, hit our Twitter account, Facebook. My staff will make sure that we look at that. We are due to get some of our final revenue projections here within a month or so, so we still have time as we begin to build the budget for introduction to the County Council in May. So thank all interested Harford County citizens. Thank you, and as our Deputy Chief of Emergency Operations would say, be safe on your way home. Thank you very much.